Good morning. We are Antonella Contin and Valentina Galiulo from Politecnico di Milano. Our presentation title is Metropolitan Enchantment and Disenchantment. Metropolitan Anthropology for the Contemporary Living Map Construction. We analyze the contemporary metropolis form role, agent for the production of new symbolic representations, as a reaction to the loss of the enchantment of the city that began with the Großstadt last century. The metropolis without aura, the commodity city, or the terrain of class struggle, where even the arts are capitalistically exploited, must be overcome. Its destiny must be theorized without contempt. It is a question of hypothesizing a change of cultural paradigm by taking a stand, choosing the point of observation from which to scrutinize reality by exposing oneself to a specific anthropological option, criticizing the paradigm of the accounting dimension of Homo economicus, which limits itself to take into consideration only what is objectively observable. A new capacity for imagining the economic productive future of the city is needed, but also this metropolis will need new spaces where inclusion can take place and where the city can be recreated as a repository of imagery. What is the ontology behind the technique of metropolitan planning and management, its vision and its symbols? Therefore, an analysis that tends to be anthropological rather than sociological is necessary to explain how a metropolis is inhabited. In short, how it is possible to live where the subject feels the full weight of their work of disenchantment, of tragic awareness of the given. Can the contemporary metropolis, with its form, modes, and dialectical structure, be the place where the life of the modern spirit is once again expressed as the destiny of the city? The technological capitalism of complete mechanization described by Weber in Economy and Society and Economic History results from the technological driven city. It has forgotten history, producing a type of rationalization that has eliminated magic and ritualism and has contributed to the formation of the modern globalized world in the name of mechanized routinization promoted by global markets. The product is Metropolitan Disenchantment. The last century Großstadt was analyzed by Massimo Cacciari. The disenchantment stems from the very definition of Großstadt as the city of capital, consumption and trade. It is from Cacciari's interpretation that we want to read the seed of a contemporary second modernity metropolis that is so different from the first modernity one in terms of structure, inhabitants and complexity, with the latter being unprecedented and incommensurable compared to the city of the past. We can no longer interpret the contemporary metropolis as we did in the last century. Metropolitan urbanity is a characteristic of a polis that expresses itself in its public places. Today, however, public places are private ones that are destined for public use. The common good has always had a space of representation in the city, which was a public space. Today, the green infrastructure is a metropolitan city monument that communicates a value for future generations and must therefore be recognized and imagined. It is the production of the metropolitan symbolic imagery, the new magic of the city. From a city of fate to a city of machine transition, the body ceased to orient itself in the world through the network of symbols the citizen was used to employ to distribute space, time, and order or meaning. In the opening between the city of the machine and the ecological city, the formation emerged of a body space, structured by a built landscape to construct a metropolitan mental map. It is an open space that inverts itself from an object background to a self-figured subject, functioning as a creative driver for constructing a mental map of the void at the metropolitan scale. The structural paradigm shift also entails the new built form types. For Shane, heterotopias are new built form types, the origin of a contemporary metropolitan urban space that has changed the paradigm, whose structure is now represented by a green-grey infrastructure and no longer by the solid street piazza matrix. In recombinant urbanism, heterotopias, says Shane, are sites that replace places. The site in genetics is a section of the gene capable of mutating independently and recombining with adjacent sites due to crossing over between genes. Heterotopia replaces the concept of place with an artificial transposition of geographic uniqueness, the site, within a new metropolitan morphotype. It is a new nature. It is therefore necessary a new image of a map conveyed by sign within the study of a structural paradigm that regulates the transition of scale, which is the primary reason for the city models to change. The green-grey infrastructure through the new types of metropolitan architectural project, urban morphotypes, megastructure, hybrid buildings, comfort containers, big boxes, it is a part of living, since it brings the domestication of space that will link to their architecture's ability to create spaces. It also allows rediscovering an intimate contact with the local scale spaces, amplifying sensations of our body, elevating them to that something mystical that characterizes the act of discovery. The green-grey infrastructure could, though, be added to the list of those beloved spaces mentioned by Gaston Bachelard in The Poetic of Space. It is a space that can be inhabited with the body, and even if it constitutes the incommensurable dimension of the contemporary metropolitan city, it is the object of memory. Memory is always in an operational nexus with imagination and the symbolic. It is an intermediary between an action program in the agenda of appointment with things and people that must be equipped with maps and charts. Metropolitan cities and create a map loading on it and organizing different temporalities and memorable symbolic relationships. We are looking for that which guides the possibility of mental memorable representation through the object detected in reality. We must reconceptualize the infrastructure in between space. Its deep structure has the syntactic capacity to order the metropolitan space according to specific internal law. It must connect the architectural type to the deep structure of the ground project as a founding part of the new built form types, and must also determine new urban-rural linkage patterns. New ways of using the land might be determined, allowing the recognition of a new conventional form of spaces in between the different urban, rural, and natural landscapes. This provides the potential for a system of contrast and hierarchies, of rhythmic differences, sequences, and oppositions that give rise to gradation of public, semi-public, and private spaces within a functional logic, which allows the new architectural sign to express itself. In this way, a new perceptive structure of the architectural language, the sign that, as in the talking architecture, convey meanings to the imagination, is also enhanced. In this sense, we must introduce a concept of memory and symbolic mediator that can regenerate the enchantment, the magic of the metropolitan city. Aragon introduced us to the world of the surreal image and the unconscious. A second way towards knowledge starts from real data but tries to understand the world in an atmosphere that generates correspondences and expresses itself through a language that tells of the encounter with the mystery of people and things. Shane introduced the surreal by describing the heterotopias of illusion as fast-changing and flexible with a high potential for change and recombination. Lynch also argued a symbolic resonance that conveys the meaning of place. The unconscious, the dark side of the things, is created through a progressive unraveling of deep meaning. Therefore, the primary structure of the city must allow symbolic deepening as it is fully experienced to encourage the construction of new meanings through which inhabitants can make the world their home. The problem is understanding the forms of the city role in the overall process of capitalist rationalization. For Cacciari, the metropolis without aura, the commodity city, or terrain of class struggle, where even the arts are capitalistically exploited, opens the door not to suffer destiny as the monkey of Zarathustra, however, to theorize about it without contempt. The metropolis is a political concept, an original political organization that makes the capitalistic system a multi-articulate urban type. Today, in the second modernity era, the metropolis' memorable image is the experience of the multiplicity of times and existence and the possibility of the synthesis given by culture, whereas the values of the metropolis public good are affirmed. Shane heterotopias of illusion are the metropolitan urbanity solution to imagine new building types such as urban morphotypes, urban-rural linkage, and dual land-use partner to build memorable beauty. Therefore, we need new tools to conceive and map the new metropolitan reality. Today, metropolitan citizens, like Anthony Giddens' reflexive individual, inhabit a stratification of urban maps on an ever-increasing scale with which they are connected in real time and virtually by web networks. That signify atopic proximity and equivalent time between cities at different distances, enabled by networks with different speed standards. We encourage the anthropology of the inhabited metropolis. The metropolitan phenomenon has been reduced to a discussion on the multiplication of jurisdiction. Anthropology, instead, considers the city structure as concerning the citizen behaviors, in scheduling their time to move around according to the most diverse motivation. We therefore deal with an inhabited metropolis, which involves a theoretical investigation on the technical tools required to conceive a memorable image of real metropolitan architecture project, an image that enables a metropolitan mental map to plan the citizen agenda. The earth motor of an anthropology of the inhabited city considers the contemporary metropolis a city of muses. This means conceiving a project idea and its strong communication through imagines agentes, archetype images repeated as analogous in the metropolis construction. In the image, Star Wars Eden, Rossi Teatro del Mondo, De Chirico Manikin. We are talking about a project rooted on topographical geographical maps looked at with hermeneutical eye. This is the key to the city of muses. Hermeneutics that discovers, invent the public good as including natives, residents, and new inhabitants. The metropolis map must be constructed for geographical reason, highlighting its green-grey architecture, the metropolitan structure, and its new edges that transcend the administrative limits of today's jurisdictions. It must address and communicate ecosystem services as the foundation of spatial and environmental justice and a new definition of its trans-action hybrid landscape. The true-to-life map of the contemporary metropolis, invested with ideal meanings, must be highly evocative of the profound mission of the metropolis decision makers as a curator for a delicate asset. They have to see and understand this analogous map, which is so much more complex and accurate than the one now forgotten of Aldo Rosso's analogous city, so intimate compared to the epic one of today. What is more, it is not just a metropolis map, but is an actual entity that concretely interacts with the citizen. The technical interpretation of a map through the science of language does not fully describe its power. It is the map image that keeps alive the story of the life that pulses there. The signs of the map are like the words of a non-verbal language. The floor mosaic of Otranto Cathedral is a map without a geography, without the technical structure of the military component. It is composed, like music, by a cyclic movement, wave, breath, alternation, voices, songs. The beauty of the Otranto map is that, in addition to possessing intrinsic rhythms, it is perceived according to the beholder's rhythms, direction, steps, physical, mental steps, sensitivity. The Otranto's map well represents the concept of harmony, of a non-random interlocking of voices parts. We must map all this when we have to describe the deep meanings, the aura of a place, which seems lost forever. It is a non-verbal semiology. The work of architecture for a modern approach to theorizing the building type in architecture is an actual semiology example. The form is the index of natural phenomena and determines the field of action of the citizen who inhabits it. It is possible to construct an architectural text by index to explore it while inhabiting the building field of action, so that, in the meantime they explore, the inhabitants react. In the example created in the Middle Age, the figures are drawn on the floor of the Cathedral of Otranto. Instead of words, frame strips without words, are used to represent things in the moment of agricultural activity in the different months of the year. For example, wine production in September. We explore how to extract the uniqueness of a place and its inhabitants from the narration of each story, through a philosophy of narration rather than logos, which can restore the uniqueness and embody subject and the necessary intervening of being in relationship. It is the theme of the map's voice as a revelation of place uniqueness. We introduce the discourse of the world relations map, understood as sign and symbol capable of recognizing and communicating the enchantment and beauty of the city again through the narrative voices. We are defining the construction process of the Metropolitan cartography maps at a small and extra small scale, dealing with what is considered fundamental according to which mechanism, sign and symbols. We also introduce a possibility to think differently by recognizing the diversity and the invisible in the map. The rebirth of enchantment for the works of human beings is necessary for a fair distribution of resources, based on the concept of value of relationship and bonds and social justice. The map is seen as a product of the relationship between the uniqueness of the world, since the sound of each narrated voice is unique. Indeed, we are not only looking for an abstract universal metropolitan territory subject, but also for the fragile subject with its relational character, embodied in the irreducible uniqueness of the narrative of a specific territory, of intelligence to be recognized, protected and developed, really lived and acted upon by metropolitan citizens. Our map has a performative character, doing, acting, becoming. Map is social staging, that through certain norm of recognition and schemes of intelligibility produce new subjects, undoing the territory's solid metrics. Today, the metropolis cannot grow by elementary addiction, but by integral that require subversions in the paradigms of urban form and the tools for imagining and perceiving it. Our question is related to how the concept of reality changes with the new information technologies, and if the communication of this reality changes at different scales. Consequently, our map must integrate the sign marked on the ground of past places with those left by contemporary crossing. It's a matter of thinking about a technique that investigates and explores the components of the landscape and its narratives, energy flows, symbols and stories that are part of the understanding of the territory and that can be maps to represent contemporary movement, stratified in the space-time of exploration. The images produced by human being built an essential part of metropolitan maps. With our mobile phones, each of us immediately becomes part of a map. So, the moving body itself is a kind of territory because it is a product of identity, relational, emotional capacity, and biometric properties that today can be calculated through wearable technological application. We deconstruct maps by including the artistic phenomenon in the construction of maps. The elementary anthropological signs of the local space will change and hybridize with those of the past. According to Didi Huberman, the image can signify reality, but with a completely different intent. It has the value of a transfer, passage, association, and not of a definition. It becomes a mental path that is never mere aestheticism, but leads to aesthetics towards conceptual, rational, and spiritual path. Though, in the map, the figure of the relationship between the elements is created and read paradoxically through a process of defiguration, that is, going beyond the mere iconic representation of the element of the territory to arrive to the hidden meaning of the subject represented, at its relationships, which we have found through a process of keywords and relative concepts within a metropolitan glossary. According to Didi Huberman, it's a question of conceiving an infinite universe and of relations and of interpretative grids. Even the smallest element of reality enters into ever new and original correspondences with another particle, opening up its meaning and the related imagery. Dissimilarity and defiguration are the two operations that create figures which, according to Didi Huberman, are not valid for what they represent visibly, but for what they show visually, beyond their appearance. Therefore, the map presents clues to ways of looking at reality. Didi Huberman refers to Pierce and Poe and defines the clue as a vestige of a contact, a mark left, a material imprint. We call it a symbolic mediator, and today we add to this concept, borrowing from Didi Huberman, the notion of symptom. Maps allow us to imagine and involve the observer through the mimetic paradoxes of dissimilarities. We cannot forget that our maps are also a technical tool for raising awareness of a context with particular criticalities to remediate. Therefore, we must provide the observer and the map's curator with conceptual tools that allow for coherence in their action. Though we introduce a phenomenological assumption that refers to the act of the subject curating the map, to what they want to represent, an aesthetic assumption that aims at the subject of the gaze and refers to what they want us to understand, an anthropological assumption dedicated to the definition of images that deeply concern the inhabitants of our context, and finally, a semiotic assumption related to the deep meaning. Furthermore, it is in this way that, as Didi Huberman points out, we can also recognize the freedom of imagery associations as a fact of structure in which each image is only clarified in the global vision of all the other, however disparate and dissimilar they must be. Thank you very much.